Good morning, and thanks so much for joining us here on Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short, the financial advisors and the father-son team behind Welcome Home Financial Partners. You can find out more about Ralph, Tim, the entire team over there on the website. That is welcomehomefp.com. You can also give a call, 804-635-3550, if you have questions about what we talk about today on the show. You want a second set of eyes on your retirement plan. You want a first set of eyes on your retirement plan. That is the number 3 offices in the Richmond location, but the number will get you there, 804-635-3550. It all starts with that complimentary conversation. The show always starts with me checking in and saying hello to Ralph and Tim. Gentlemen, good to see you again. How you doing today?
Doing great, Chris.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to spend with the listener. So here we are at this point. I think it's safe to say, we're a month into the year, and there's still a lot of questions about 2026, the uncertainties of, what things will look like. A big question I think we've been asking for a while is, will 2026 be the year that Congress finally deals with the future of Social Security? Let's be honest, the clock is ticking here. 2033 is what the deadline is. I think that's what they're saying now. So less than 8 years away from the program's trust fund running out of money, which could possibly trigger huge cuts across the board when it comes to benefits. Here's Mike Murphy with the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget on the Mandy Connell podcast.
It's coming now. We need to get on it. So the issue here is Social Security. It's a vitally important federal program. There's 70 million people about on Social Security. There's going to be more by the time, 2033 rolls around. When we reach that point, by law, they are required, when it goes insolvent, to match what the scheduled benefits are with the revenues that are coming in. And when that happens, it would have to be in a 23% across the board cut. That is estimated to be equating to about $17,000 for the average middle income couple. It would be truly devastating.
So essentially a quarter of your benefits could be gone if Congress fails to act. So here's the question. Do we roll the dice and see what the government does, or is there a way to help plan ahead and prepare in the event that these cuts do actually happen?
Well, I think we can all say the same thing, is you probably shouldn't gamble on Congress passing, what's in our best interest, right? So, I think it's important for people to know kind of what's happening, if we can know what's happening. But, you shouldn't rely on the federal government to make sure that your retirement lifestyle ends up being the way that you want it to. So, there's so many naysayers out there of, 2033, 2035, whatever. At the end of the day, we do have to stop kicking the can down the road, and we really need to figure out, we need to get the train back on the track, so to speak. But, there's a lot of folks out there that rely on Social Security as a big piece of their retirement income. Well, if this comes around and they're only going to get 75% or 60% or 80% of that benefit, they're not going to be able to do the things that they wanted to. And I'll tell you one thing right now is that you probably don't want to work 30, 40, maybe 50 years just for the government not to get things done in our best interest. And now we're not going to be able to do the things that we like. So I think also, too, is you need to stay flexible. We talk about building a retirement roadmap quite a bit. And, yes, that's great. But we also want to make sure that this plan is going to be flexible. Life's going to throw curveballs, whether it's Congress not getting bills passed or whether that's your spouse going into a nursing home. There's so many different things out there. And, one thing that's often overlooked when it comes to retirement is the overall planning, right? People take a look at their statements or their TSPs, their 401ks, and say, hey, guess what? I got $1 million. Well, I've seen surveys that say, hey, if I've got $1 million, I should be fine. Well, how do you know that? Right. What do you want to do in retirement? So, kind of going back to Congress is we need to make sure that our plan is going to be flexible enough. So if the overall amount of money you're going to receive from Social Security doesn't get cut, great. But if it does, we got to be able to pivot from our retirement plan.
I would say a couple of things on this point, Chris. One of them is, number one, if you expect the government to do anything for us, you better think again. Number two, Social Security wasn't designed to be the only source of your retirement income. A lot of people, thought that's what it's supposed to be about, but it's not. It's basically to help you along, but it's not designed to do everything that you've ever wanted it to be. So it's just a foundation of your retirement house, not the entire house. So, and it's not going broke. It's just going to be, if we have to, reduce the benefits, but it might catch you with your pants down if you don't have proper planning. If you don't have all the things that you wanted to do mapped out and how much is it going to cost you, and you were relying on your just Social Security to do all that, and you lost 25%, you're going to be holding, left there holding the bag, So you just don't want to rely just on one paycheck in your retirement years. If that's what you're trying to do, that's going to be a kind of a sad state of affairs, in my opinion. But the other thing a lot of people have a misconception is they want to rely on Social Security, claim it the earliest that they can because they say they earned it. Well, that's all fine and good. You have, but if you're still working and you're taking it, you're going to have to pay some of it back. Mm-hmm. And just understand, when you do take it earlier than your full retirement age, you're going to get less money than you should have. So, those are all things when it comes to Social Security that you need to understand. But I think the biggest thing that, even like what Tim was talking about, is you got to have a plan for what your retirement's going to look like. You can't rely on your neighbors. You can't rely on your kids. You can't rely on the government. Rely on yourself and having a plan that take into consideration maybe delaying Social Security a little bit longer, maybe taking part-time job, or while you're working, let's save more towards that 401k, or maybe if you're lucky enough to have a pension. Those are all things that you need to have some type of fiduciary advisor to help you along the way, because I don't know about you, but the amount of financial literacy that we got when we were in high school was pretty limited. And I think it's even less today than it was when I went to school back in the Stone Age, So you can tell me a little bit more, Chris, what it's like today. But, those are things that you really need to take in consideration. Rely on yourself and what you're trying to do, and work with somebody that understands finance, what you're trying to do. And the goal isn't fear. It's really preparation and peace of mind for you when you do reach that magical age.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think to kind of sum that up is we don't want to get caught with our pants down, right? So we want to make sure that we're in good shape. But also, too, is people have to factor in, Medicare premiums. It could be harder to afford because you're getting less money in your pocket from Social Security if they do cut the benefits. So there's a lot of things to have into consideration there.
We could do an entire show. We could do a series of shows, I think, talking about how we got here when it comes to Social Security. The simplest explanation, people are living longer, so they're claiming the benefit longer. There are less people paying into Social Security than there were per recipient than there were when the program first began. So you combine those and you can see how the money gets depleted quicker. So it is something that they say they need to address. They say they're going to address, but as we mentioned, the kicking the can down the road, we're running out of road. So take control of what you can control. Start developing a plan with the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners where, if there is a reduction in benefits down the line, you've worked in some fail-safes, more or less, to make sure that it doesn't involve a reduction in lifestyle for you. It all starts with a phone call, 804-635-3550, to get that second opinion on your plan right now. Maybe you are neglecting taxes in retirement. Maybe you're neglecting Medicare or long-term care things. Maybe you're neglecting a possible reduction in benefits. Shining a light on it and then finding ways to take that on is what the team does with that complimentary second opinion. 804-635-3550. Or the website. You can find out more there and schedule a time at welcomehomefp.com. Now, are you planning a getaway this year that requires a flight? Travel experts say finding the lowest fares often depends on when you buy your tickets. Usually flights during the holidays, spring breaks, peak summer periods, they're going to cost you more. More people want to travel. Is it right? I don't know, but it makes sense. So it pays to book ahead and, what we said a second ago, be flexible. So if timing and flexibility matter for travel, how do they matter for retirement planning, especially when it comes to making your money last as long as you do?
Sure. Well, I think timing's critical for your withdrawals. And I know I've mentioned this story before, but there's a lot of people out there that will say, well, you know what? I'm just going to leave my money where it is. It's, done well for 30 or 40 years. I'm not super concerned. I think I'm going to be okay. And guess what? If the market's not doing well, then that just means I'm not going to take that extra trip. Well, I can tell you, most people, when they retire, they want to live the way that they want, and they don't want anybody telling them what to do, including the stock market. So, timing's very crucial. And if you leave everything where it sits and things don't go well, what's going to happen? So I think it's coming back to having that plan, having that flexibility, but also having a mix of protection and growth. There's so many people out there that don't know that there's different vehicles that you could use potentially to ensure a decent or modest return and still having some protection from the stock market. And I think, we talk about having multiple streams of income. Well, hey, let's go ahead and say, if we've got a few different accounts, if things aren't going well in the market and we've got one account that's solely just invested in stocks, well, let's leave that one alone. Mm-hmm. Let's kind of pivot back to, hey, here's our protected growth route. So maybe our worst case is we don't make money for that year from that account. Whereas the stock market and the stocks, they're going to go up and down, right? So we can kind of let that roller coaster do its thing, and hopefully we can get back on it when the ride's going to be enjoyable, right? So going back to flexibility is let's have multiple streams of income as well. Talking about the Social Security piece is we don't want to rely on one paycheck. One of the worst things that you can do. And I think there's a lot of people out there now that will be able to sit on the front porch in their rocking chair. But what you don't want to do is sit out front on your rocking chair and have to wait for that paycheck to come into the mail because you've only got one coming. So that's why I think it's important that we've got multiple streams of income coming in, but also taking a look at the taxation piece as well. So there's a lot of things that come into play with that. And, at the end of the day, we're guaranteed two things in life, and I'll incorporate the third one, is things are going to change. We've got to adapt to that change, right? And obviously this goes without saying, but the first two guarantees are death and taxes.
And I would say on that tax situation, most people don't take into consideration taxes when they're in retirement, because a lot of people will ask us, what do you mean I have to pay taxes when I'm retired? I'm over 65 and I'm retired. Why should I be paying taxes? That's because the government says you have to. Mm-hmm. That's not because I said you have to, or Tim, or you, Chris. It's the government. So, but at the same time, a lot of people, they've done a good job, and all of a sudden they understand that the amount of money they have to take out of their retirement accounts are going to increase because now they have RMDs. If they never took any money out of that account until you're age 73 or maybe 75, depending on your birthday, you're going to be required to take a certain amount of money out. Now, if you didn't need it, why would you want to take it out? So you'd have to pay taxes on it. Probably most people wouldn't. That's why the government says you have to take it out, because we want our money from you. Whether we deserve it or not is a different question. But at the same time, those are things that people need to understand, is that during your retirement years and you have a good sum of money in your retirement accounts, it may push you up into a different tax bracket because the amount of money that you have to take out, and planning for these things beforehand might make it a little bit easier for you to swallow. And you might think about, while you're in a lower tax bracket, maybe convert some of that into a Roth, but those have to pay taxes up front. But if you're minimizing your taxes later down the road, it might make sense to you. So those are all questions that we try and help people answer as fiduciaries, and just get them to understand it's in your hands at this point in time what it's going to look like down the road, not anybody else's.
Sure. And I think also, too, the most important thing, and coming from, families that could potentially have a little bit of stress or issues when it comes to travel, is planning ahead is going to avoid that stress for the most part, right? So if you plan properly, well, on your trip, maybe you don't have to show up 3 hours early to the airport like some people do, right, Dad? So, yes. And I think, one thing that you don't want to have in retirement is stress. So the better the planning, the sooner you plan, the better off you should be.
Ralph, I'm pretty sure you and I are on the same page when it comes to that. I have high travel anxiety. I'm like, okay, flight is at whatever time. I need to get to the airport by now, which means I need to leave here, which means I need to get this much sleep. It's a whole thing. It is planning, and it goes back to what we've talked about before. People spend more time planning a vacation, a trip, than they do their actual retirement, when the truth of it is a retirement is going to be much longer, cost more, and probably have a lot of those vacations in there. But you have to have a plan. You need to go ahead and account for these things. What is taxes going to look like in the future? Have I taken into account taxes? What is my risk tolerance? What is growth going to look like? It's a lot of questions that people may not have answered yet. That is okay. It is something that the team, the fiduciaries, Ralph and Tim Short, will talk to you about, educate you, give you that input, and then at the end of the day, let you make, hopefully, a well-informed, educated decision. They can't help you, though, unless you schedule a time to speak with them. Complimentary conversation, welcomehomefp.com or 804-635-3550. Once again, 804-635-3550. When an online influencer heard of an 88-year-old man working at a Detroit supermarket, he decided, I'm going to go pay the store a visit. And he found out that Ed Bombas is forced to work full-time because, well, he can't retire.
Retired from General Motors in 99. 2012, I went bankrupt and they took my pension away from me.
Oh my gosh. Do you have a wife?
She passed away 7 years ago. The thing that hurt me the most was my wife was real sick. When they took the pension, they also took the health care coverage and all but $10,000 of my life insurance. So I sold the house, sold the property I had, and we made it through. My wife died 7 years ago.
And you're working here how many days a week?
I work 5 days a week, 8 hours a day.
And you do that because you have to, or?
Yeah, I don't have enough income.
There is a good news to this story. The influencer launched a GoFundMe and raised $1.7 million so that Ed could retire. But here's the truth of it. A lot of us won't get a viral rescue. So how do you help somebody build a retirement income plan so they won't experience an Ed moment where they are forced to unretire?
Well, this is, a really good and bad story, and I heard about this a few weeks ago on the news. And this just kind of speaks to maybe there is a little bit of good in social media. We see so much negative things online and so many negative stories. This is a good story. It's sad that the position that he was put in, but it was really great that this influencer was able to start that GoFundMe and let him finally retire after all those years, right? But kind of getting back to the question is, there's a lot of folks that don't necessarily know exactly how to start that planning process. They know that they need to do something, but they're kind of dragging their feet when it comes to, hey, I don't know what questions to ask. Should I go and meet with a fiduciary? Should I meet with a financial planner or advisor? And they don't really know what route to go. And, Dad and I and other folks, part of the team, so many people have such anxiety when it comes down to sitting down and creating that plan. And, we've said it before on the program is, people will spend multiple hours to try to plan a 10-day cruise, but they won't spend a couple meetings with a fiduciary to sit down and plan out the next 30, 40 years of their life. And I think it's probably fairly important to do that because what you don't want to do is, once again, just say, hey, I've got this 401k with X amount of dollars in it. Well, that's what I'm going to have to start, peeling away. I got to peel that onion back a little bit. And, if things aren't doing well and, we start pulling money out and we're losing money, plus we're using money. Well, you might not be able to retire the way that you like. And after 3 or 5 years, especially if we have a downturn, you might be going back to work. And I can tell you, most people don't want to go back to work in this case with this gentleman is there were certain stipulations or scenarios why he had to go back to work. Well, what you don't want to do is run out of money in 3 and 5 years because there's a market downturn and now we're working 40 hours a week in a supermarket. So it's very important to sit down with a fiduciary, especially a local one that knows who knows the area, who wants to get to know you to figure out what your goals are. And then that's the way that you formulate that plan. There's a lot of people out there that say, well, you know what, in my 401k, I do have a safe fund. So why don't I just put my money in a safe fund? Well, that's fine and dandy. But if you're making 3%, let's call it, and inflation's at 5%, you're not making any money. You might not be losing it, but you're not making it. And I can tell you that money is there to buy things. And if you're losing your purchasing power with your dollars, you still technically are losing out. So you want to make sure that you've got a plan. Like you say it a lot of times too, Chris, is, maybe a second opinion or a second set of eyes, or maybe just a first set of eyes. It's very important for people to take action because it's their livelihood. This is their retirement years, right? That's what we work so long and hard for, is we want to get to that point and then do the things that we like.
But I would say also to anybody, the best thing that you can do is have a plan. Mm-hmm. But even though you have a rock solid plan, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work out the way you want it to. Look at it this way. Who would have ever imagined that a pension from GM would not be there for you if you retired? That's his situation. That happened, back during the financial crisis, but it does, and it can happen. So just be aware things that you think you've got in place that works very well may not work exactly the way you thought about it. But guess what? Things work out if you understand what's happening and make adjustments to your plan. And that's the key issue here that I think everybody needs to understand.
As Tim said earlier, death, taxes, and change are really the three inevitabilities. So you want to go ahead and have a plan in place that can pivot with you as the circumstances do merit. That starts with picking up the phone. It actually starts by you joining us today. You're showing that you're taking your retirement planning seriously. So great job with that. The next step is letting Ralph and Tim put pen to paper, get to know you, and start developing that retirement roadmap. 804-635-3550 is that phone number. 804-635-3550 or online, welcomehomefp.com. Somebody who probably could have used a little bit of financial guidance upon his retirement, Odell Beckham Jr. He played 10 seasons in the NFL, including a run with the LA Rams where he won a Super Bowl championship. He made just over $100 million during his career. Not too bad, right? But he recently told the Pivot podcast that despite all that, he still struggled when it came to big money.
Can you make that last forever? And you always hear the people who ain't us and ain't been in the position like, oh, well, that would last a lifetime. Yeah, this job that I sacrificed my whole life for, they are giving me that. I didn't ask for the certain dollar amount or whatever, but we weren't taught about no financial literacy. We weren't taught this skill.
You know, going back to Ralph, what you said, I was taught how to balance a checkbook in high school, but that was by my mom. I didn't learn anything financially in that regard. And it's the same sort of thing when it comes to so many people out there. What can Odell Beckham's story teach us about planning for life once the actual paycheck from our job stops?
Well, it's important, but kind of a little sidebar. Obviously, if people have listened to this show before, they know I'm a diehard Washington fan. Mm-hmm. And since Odell Beckham spent most of his career at the Giants, I cannot believe that John Harbaugh is going there. I'm not too happy about that because he's a hell of a coach. And now I know for the next 5 years, unless he just, loses his mind, that my Washington team's going to have to play him 10 times in 5 years. So I'm not super thrilled about that. But this is important. And, there's so many stories of professional athletes that end up going broke in 3 to 5 years after they retire from the game because – yes, it is nice knowing that we've got X amount of millions of dollars coming our way. But at the end of the day, once you buy that Maserati, you buy your parents a home, you buy your second home and your third home, that money goes bye-bye, right? So, and I don't know with the NFL as far as the pension limits are concerned. I know you have to be there to be fully vested in this, that, and the other, but there's a lot of people that aren't going to be able to have that. So if you're not making $10 million a year because you can jump up in the air and catch the ball in the end zone with 2 fingers. If you're doing, the things that most normal Americans do, right? The grind of 40, 50, 60 hours a week, things are going to look a lot different. Obviously if your salary is $100,000 and now you're making $10 million, things might be able to last as long as possible. But I can tell you, there's a lot of people that the more money they get, the worse off they're going to be because they don't know how to handle that. Because they're spending their money on outrageous things and think it's an endless pile of money until you get to a point it's like, oh, well, you know what? I don't have that anymore. So, it's kind of going back to the income plan in retirement. If you've got a couple $1 million in your 401k, well, great, congratulations, but how do you turn that into income? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the more important topic. It's not, okay, hey, we've got millions of dollars. It's okay, I need X amount of dollars to live. So one, we have to uncover what that X is. We need to know what we need to have to live. But also, too, is how are we going to get that? Kind of going back as earlier is, if we leave everything into the stock market, we know we need an additional $10,000 a month. We start losing money, and now we've spent $120,000 of after-tax money, let's call it, because if we have all pre-tax, it's going to be more than that. So that's going back to the income plan, and that's where a lot of professional athletes, a lot of people making that type of money, that's something where they fall short on because nobody ever talks to them about that.
And I think most people, once they've got the money in their hand, they think it's always going to be an endless source of income to them. And without realizing, sooner or later, your skill set's probably not going to be there for you, or somebody younger is going to take your spot, one or the other. Because, time does creep up on us, and you may not be able to do the same things at age 30 that you did when you were 25. Or maybe somebody at age 40 can't do the things at age 25. But you need to plan anything that you get with the aspect that later down the road, you're going to need it. It's not about today. The other thing is your lifestyle's changed probably, but also maybe you change wives a couple of times, because we've seen that in professional athletes, that they might take a big chunk from you and without you realizing that's what's going to happen. So there's so many different things that we could talk about that, but I think the biggest issue is understand money, understand that you need some help, and get it from a fiduciary, somebody that understands what you're trying to do, and their goal is to help you get where you need to be, not just sell you a product.
There are people out there, lots of people, I'm sure, who live paycheck to paycheck, regardless of what their paycheck is. And hopefully some of that money is already being tucked away into a 401k, things like that. And for them, even if the paycheck gets bigger, again, if you're going from a college student to, signing multi-million-dollar contracts, they're accustomed to that. And so the same sort of thing, they're still living paycheck to paycheck. Here's the thing, regardless of what you do, if you're a surely Hall of Fame eligible, athlete, or, you're working 40, 60 hours, in your job right now, one day those paychecks will stop. How are you going to replace that? How are you going to have that money still coming in? That income, it is, I don't know who said this originally, but income is the outcome that matters the most. So taking your 401k, turning those retirement accounts into a retirement plan, that is what it's all about. That is what Ralph and Tim help people with. How do we make sure that that quality of life, if at all possible, stays the same throughout your retirement? It's what the retirement roadmap is all about. WelcomeHomeFP.com. Find out more about them. Find out more about the First Friday events. Set up a time there, or give a call at 804-635-3550. There is a phrase out there, and I know you guys are familiar with it. It's called the millionaire next door. It's people who have wealth but never really show it or talk about it. Some call them the stealthy wealthy, which I like. I like the rhyme. But what are some of the things that they're doing, and what can we learn from them?
Well, I think the biggest thing when it comes to that in my eyes is not keeping up with the Joneses, right? There's so many people nowadays that they just focus in on, hey, well, my neighbor just got the new Corvette. Now I've got to upgrade my car and try to match them. And that's where a lot of people get into trouble. And I just said it is usually, well, I shouldn't say usually, but there's a lot of times when the higher income earners are the people who are worse off than people who are making $100,000 a year versus $300,000 a year, is they feel like they've got an endless supply of income. I know we had done a show not too long ago where we were talking about Shaq and his mindset. And, when they were talking about, well, I just signed a $500 million contract for the next 10 years, so I'm going to get $50 million each year. Well, I'm going to go ahead and blow it because guess what? Next year, I'm getting another $50 million. And I think it's important to not be flashy, not drive the newest, best car. And, it comes down to the planning piece is, okay, if we've got 3 car notes, 2 house notes, all these things, well, we're going to need a lot more cash flow, a lot more income once we retire, instead of, okay, hey, I've paid my vehicles off. I don't have any mortgage payments, all of these things. So I'm going to need less income. So that's less money I need to draw down on my assets. I think that's a big piece of this is you've got to control your spending. You hear a lot of people out there talking about debt. Well, debt's not necessarily a bad thing. The uncontrollable debt is the bad thing. If your spending habits are, quite frankly, ridiculous, you might not be able to have those retirement dreams that you've worked so hard for. So kind of, going back to, there's so many people out there now that have eclipsed that $1 million mark, but that's because of really good things that they've done, strategies that they've got, and goals, and not, okay, hey, it's all about the materialistic things. I need a new vehicle. I need to outpace my neighbor, those types of things.
And I think most people that have real wealth are, live on Main Street. They're just like me and you. They're neighbors that you have that you don't know that they're really wealthy, okay? But they pay themselves first. They start investing money. The number of people that we have to convince when they come in to start investing in their 401ks or match it, the most that you can match into it for you to have a better income later down the road. I mean, that's the other thing. And they basically have a budget. They know what they need to spend. They don't spend much more than what they have budgeted in there. And they're disciplined. I mean, they're going to put that money aside every month, every paycheck, whatever it is, and they want to protect their privacy. They do not want anybody else to know about, social media that, I just got a $28 million bonus today. So what am I going to do with it?
Well, that'd be nice.
Yeah. But, the other thing is, and this is what I would say to most people, if you teach your kids good money habits, you probably are going to have a better lifestyle in retirement because guess what? They're not relying on you to pay their bills because they haven't done a good job. So those are some things that I think most people that are your neighbors that have pretty good sum of money are doing. They are doing it the correct way. They're focusing on net worth, not about the income that they've got. They avoid bad debt. And they live below their means. I mean, it's pretty common sense, simple things that a lot of people aren't trained to do these days.
You just reminded me of another lesson that I actually learned in high school. It was in the kitchen. My mom taught me 401k. When your job in the future offers you a company match, take that because that is free money. That has stuck with me my entire career. But she also said never touch it. That's not true. At some point, you're going to have to turn that into income, right? And so you need something a little bit more than that. But it all comes down to a word you guys both said, and that is discipline. How do I make sure that I'm not spending above my means? I'm not taking on more debt. I'm not neglecting taxes or healthcare, things like that. Discipline can be a tough thing to instill in yourself. But if you have people like the fiduciaries, Ralph and Tim Short, the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners, along with you, that retirement roadmap, they can help you, hopefully instill that discipline with you. But you have to make the call. You have to reach out and set up a time to speak with them. Go to welcomehomefp.com, schedule that complimentary second opinion or first opinion, or just, whatever it is to find out more about them and have that conversation. Welcomehomefp.com, or you can always call 804-635-3550. And as always, want to thank you so much for joining us here on Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short. Hope you have a great week ahead of you. Stay safe out there. Gentlemen, hope you have a great week as well. As we wrap up, though, I'm going to leave you with the final word.
Thank you, Chris. And yeah, I think it's important, for everybody to kind of sit down, step back, and figure out what their goals are for retirement. We talk about building that retirement roadmap quite a bit, bringing you into the office where we'll sit down with you personally. Well, winter's here. It's cold. It's snowy. It's rainy. It's icy. Whatever. Don't let that get in your way. So, we can do virtual meetings as well. So I think it's important that, hey, maybe we aren't going into work today because it's now snowing. Work said just work from home. Maybe we could sneak in a little hour and figure out how to start that process off. So once again, as much as we talk about building that retirement roadmap in the office, we can do these things virtually as well. We can start by just a quick, simple phone consultation. So once again, everybody stay safe. Thank you for listening and take care.
All content is for information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax or legal advice or provide the basis for any financial decision, nor is it intended to be a projection of current or future performance or indication or future results. Opinions expressed herein are solely those of Welcome Home Financial Partners and Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC. The information contained in this material has been derived from sources believed to be reliable, but is not guaranteed as to accuracy and completeness and does not purport to a complete analysis of the materials discussed. All information and ideas should be discussed in detail with your individual advisor prior to the implementation. Each individual investor's situation is different, and any ideas provided may not be appropriate for your particular circumstance. Advisor services are offered by Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor in the state of Virginia. Being registered as an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. Insurance products and services are offered through WPI Holding, Virginia Insurance License Number 138509, an affiliated company. The information contained herein should in no way be construed or interpreted as a solicitation to sell or offer to sell advisory services to any resident of any state other than the state of Virginia or where otherwise legally permitted. Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC and Welcome Home Financial Partners are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency.